Hello, this is Chris with Phoenix Gaming, and today we're going to talk about things I'd like to see with Drukhari on the Dataslate. First of all, I want to give a little disclaimer. Yes, I am a Games Workshop employee. I work for the build team and the events team, and I build terrain and models for the different events that we run, and I'm also a 40k and kill team judge when we go to do things like the Chicago Open or the Tampa Open. I do not have communication with anybody on the rules team. I'm saying this up front. Everything that I say is purely speculation. I do not have any insider information. So do not go around telling your homies that a GW employee gave you all kinds of insider information. That would be a blatant lie. I have had to pull videos before. I would appreciate it if you guys don't run around telling people that I'm giving you leaks, because I'm 100% not. I can promise you that. So we're just going to touch on some HQs in the battle line. We'll go through pretty much those in their entirety, and then we'll talk about the things that need the most help from the other categories, is how we're going to structure that. HQs, Archon, the best character in our index. Nothing really needs changed. It's a great data sheet. He has a great ability, and he provides a good bonus to the units that he's attached to, so nothing really needs change there. The Succubus, at 70 points, she's not terrible. The real issue is that the squad she leads is underwhelming. I've talked about witches and how I just am sad that they're kind of bad right now. Sustained hits is nice, and honestly, she could drop 5 to 10 points, and you probably still wouldn't see her on the table very much. A lot of it has to do with the witches. Blood Dancer only affects her, so it's a bit overpriced until the witch cult stuff gets some love, which I will touch on a little bit later. The Homunculus is a solid data sheet. It provides a good bonus to its unit. It's fine where it's at. I don't see it changing much. If it does, it might get a 5-point drop at the most, but overall, I think it's solid where it's at. The only thing I would like to see is maybe it gets to go in some different units, but we'll talk about that also later. The Beastmaster on paper looks solid. I've not put one on the table yet. I've been busy kit bashing them, and I've been just busy doing a lot of work on my army to prep for Tampa. So the Beastmaster hasn't been high on my list of characters to test. Lilith at 105, she's not bad. Actually, she's really good. The problem isn't her. The problem is that, unless you want her shot off the table, witches are still what you have to put her in. But her bonus to witches at least makes them serviceable. Strength 4 -2 means that if your opponent is running infantry, you can at least not wound it on 5s or 6s. For the most part, you'll wound it on 4s or 5s. So again, not bad, not great. Her price is fine as long as witches come down. Otherwise, she probably needs to come down. But again, we'll touch on that more later. Drazar is great. I like him a lot. He's just too many points. If Incubi get a points drop and he stays the same, that works out. If Incubi don't change, then he's got to come down. Battle line, we all know Cabalites are the bee's knees. That is our #1 unit right now for the most part outside of Scourges. They are really good for utility. They are really good for damage output, and they're really solid. Like, I can't complain. I don't think they get any change. Racks are okay. I don't have any real complaints on them. If they came down a point per model, which means you'd spend 60 for 5 instead of 65, I wouldn't complain. But overall, I don't have any complaints about racks. I've put them on the table, and only rarely do I have a bad interaction with them. But that's mostly because of my stupidity, not because of the racks. Witches at 110 points, they are just way overpriced for what they provide. They either need a datasheet rework, which is what I hope they get, or a points drop to give them any real viability. The current datasheet could be 90 points for 10, and I still doubt a lot of people would run them. They're just not worth the points when you can get Cabalites for not that much more, or you can get 5-man rack units for your min-size units for your utility and stuff. So they're just very underwhelming. The datasheet isn't great, and I don't know how you adjust that datasheet with points to make people want to put them on the table. I do have some thoughts on it. We'll cover that at the end. The non-battle line infantry that I think needs help, I think Grotesques need some love. When you look at the fact that they're almost at Terminator level points, but you don't get either the Terminator durability nor the Terminator damage output, it just seems a little strange. The datasheet is okay. You get a 4-up fight on death, and they just need maybe a little points drop. If you take them from 105 to 100 or 90, or you allow the homunculus to drop in to give the unit the 4-up feel no pain, I think that justifies their points. If you're telling me I could drop a homunculus unit into grotesques, I would definitely consider that, and I would probably put grotesques on the table then. The problem is that they're just underwhelming for their points, and they're not anywhere near as durable. Yeah, they have the 5-up feel no pain and the -1 to wound strap, but with the 6-up invuln and the way shooting is in the game right now, I just feel like they don't stay on the table as long as they arguably should, and they don't need much. Just a little bit of love to just kind of push them over, which to me is the theme of our index. Nothing is outright terrible for the most part, but so much of it is just in this weird spot where it's like it just needs this little bump to get it to average to good. Incubi, I think, are a really solid data sheet. Their ability is okay because Battle Shock isn't the best ability to have. So many units have a Battle Shock of 6 or 7, so they're making it more often than they're failing it, which I get. I get that that's probably the intent, is you don't want things constantly Battle Shocked. But having that as your data sheet ability to force a Battle Shock roll seems kind of underwhelming when that's how Battle Shock is intended to work. 17 points a model for a dedicated melee unit with toughness 3 in the current state of the game is absolutely absurd. They died to Overwatch. They can't survive bolt gunfire. If you make one slight mistake with them, they just die. Their melee output is pretty good, especially if you have Drazar in the unit. So that is also a very good thing to have. Like I said, the problem isn't that the Incubi datasheet is bad. It's just that it's way too many points. I would prefer a datasheet rework that makes them worth their 17 points. I don't know how we do that. Maybe change their ability to fight first instead of battle shock, or give them an ability that is actually worth having, or they just get a points drop. And I think that's what's going to be the first order of business, as we've seen so far, really towards the end of 9th and through 10th, is points drops first, datasheet rework second. And it's not the worst way to go about doing it. I'm not complaining about that. It's just what I would like to see from a player perspective is I'd like to see my data sheets just get made a little bit better. Some of the other stuff that needs help, Hellions. Hellions have great utility, and they have okay melee. Like, they are not, again, it's a classic example of they're not a terrible data sheet. They just need a little love to push them into that average to good range. But you're paying that flight tax on a non-infantry unit with fly. So I think fixing them isn't that hard. If you just give them the infantry keyword, I think that goes a long way to just making them better, because now they're interacting with terrain like infantry. Unless fly gets a rework, which maybe we see in the data slate, maybe we don't. I don't know. But at over 20 points a model, it just seems way overcosted. Like I said, they have great utility and function. They're just too expensive for what you get out of them. A good option would maybe to give them Lance on their melee weapons if you don't want to drop points. That's just my take on it. But I think Lance is one of those things that I think could fix a lot of the witch units in general, but we'll kind of touch on that, like I said, later. Reavers, there's nothing inherently wrong with them. Their points aren't terrible. They're not terrible. They're maybe just a hair overpointed. You get 3 for 75 points. If they went down to 70 points for 3, that wouldn't be the end of the world. The real thing I would like to see is I'd just like to see them get their melee profile back. Watching all my blade veins go to just like 2 attacks at 0 AP and strength 3 or strength 4 is just kind of bad. It just feels bad. I miss having an actual melee army. That's what drew me into Drukhari. I don't know about all of you, but I love witches and I love incubi, and that's really what I was running because I'm going to digress just a little bit here as I do. What got me started on Drukhari was Yanari, and it was specifically the witches and the incubi that I was bringing in my Yanari lists. And then I slowly just transitioned. So that's how that ended up happening. Overall, aircraft, I don't think that's exclusive to Drukhari. I think a lot of the aircraft is just overpointed right now, but I do think that's intentional. I think GW as a company is trying to figure out how to balance them better. And until they do, I think they're just going to keep points high enough that most people aren't going to run them. And so until they either get a points drop or fix the rules so that they understand how to balance the units, I just think aircraft will kind of sit from a competitive standpoint. Dedicated transports, glorified trucks. That's what we're calling the Raiders right now. You're paying fly tax for a flyability that really doesn't give you anything. It's almost a detriment at this point because you're paying points for it. The data sheet is okay. It lost a lot coming from codex to index. They lost their melee profile, they lost their grizzly trophies, they lost their splinter veins. Like, they lost a lot coming from codex to index. And I understand why. I understand that Drukhari had a lot of weird options on their vehicles, especially their transports. And so rather than try to figure that out for the index, it was here's a very generic data sheet that will let you do what you need to do. So if we don't want to rework the data sheet, they need to come down to about 60 points. Again, unless Fly gets a rework to make it worth having. They just need to come down to 60-ish points. Trucks are sitting at 50, and I think trucks are probably going to jump up to 55 or 60 in the data slate. I don't think orcs get touched a lot. Just a little digression again. I think orcs, by and large, stay where they're at. I think you get 2 or 3 units that go up just a hair, and then maybe 2 or 3 units that go down just a hair. But overall, I don't think orcs get a lot of treatment. But if the truck stays at 50, there's no reason not to have these drop down to 60, 65 points. I understand that they could be pretty silly if they're too cheap because of the amount of bodies you can just put into them and the amount of shooting that would come out of them. But overall, they're just not worth 80, 90 points, whatever they're sitting at right now. I forget if it's 80 or 90. They're just not worth it. Like, they just need to come down in points, and that would fix them. Venoms, again, great data sheet. Points are solid. My only real complaint is I'd just like to have my blade veins back. That's going to be a consistent complaint for me. I'd like to be able to charge things with my transports like I used to and feel like I might actually do something rather than just like, all right, here's 1-3 up save. Yay. So, and that's just a personal complaint. There's nothing wrong with Venoms. I think they're fine. I run 3 of them in most of my lists. So, obviously, I don't think they're bad. It's just a little aside. What I do think will happen overall, I think we're just going to see points drops across the board. You won't see maybe 2 or 3 data sheets get touched. Like I said, I don't think the Cabalites get touched. I don't think the Venoms get touched. I don't, Scourges. There's a handful of things that won't drop, but I think you're just going to see Incubi, Witches, and stuff like that come down in points. I don't think we see any real rules overhauls, which is a shame. But I could be wrong, you know. But what that would do is that would put us in a pseudo horde state. Not quite a horde, not quite not. In my opinion, we're just a little too elite right now anyway. Like, things do need to get a little cheaper. But if we stay in this weird in-between state that we're in right now, I think we just need some reworks, right? Being a pseudo horde army isn't terrible. It doesn't fix the bad data sheets, but it does at least give you some extra bodies so that you get a little breathing room. You have some units that you can use to try to bait out some of the overwatches, and then if they get overwatched, you get some breathing room, right? So that's where the points drops, while not what I'd like to see happen, would still be nice. Like, if you're telling me I can run a couple squads of witches and get that extra breathing room, I can send one squad in. If you don't overwatch them, I don't send the other ones out, and then I just charge you, right? It's one of those where it's not a perfect fix, but I can see the utility in it. Here's what I'd like to see happen. To me, the easiest way to help bring the bad units in the index up isn't through points adjustments, but just through some minor rules adjustments. I think witch cult units should all just have advance and charge baked in. They shouldn't be able to shoot unless they have assault weapons, but they should all be able to advance and charge. That was one of the biggest things that we lost access to that I think really hurts our army. Our dedicated melee units need advance and charge. They do. They just need it. And only being able to do it with one unit really hurts. So open up advance and charge to witch cult units, and then take the witch cult advance and charge strat, get rid of it, and then replace it with one of the following. For a command point, you can give the unit +1 to wound on the charge only. That makes witches a lot more viable. That makes the succubus a lot better by herself with the witches, because she doesn't do much for the unit. She does give stuff to the unit, but overall, she's not a buff unit. She's just a blender. I think that would be a great way to fix them. The other option, I think, is for 2 command points, you get to pick one witch cult unit, and until the end of the phase, weapons they're equipped with get either anti-infantry 3, anti-vehicle 4, anti-monster 4, or anti-mounted 4. You get one of those things, you get to pick it in the phase, and then that one unit gets it for the rest of the phase. Now, that could probably end up being a little silly, which is why I think it should get pointed at 2 command points. I don't think it should be 1, because that could be extremely powerful. But what that does is that gives you access to basically the old potent metallotoxin strat that we used to have, so that, your witches aren't just relegated to killing T3 bodies. Like, we could actually send them into something and have them do damage. It might not be a lot, because they're still only -1 AP unless you run Lilith. But it gives them a utility that they just don't have. No, it doesn't give them a utility. Let me rephrase. It gives them a versatility that they just don't have. Because they still don't really have much utility. They don't get to advance and do anything. They don't get to, like, they're not great for being action monkeys because they're way too expensive. So, like I said, it's one of those where I think one of those two would go a long way to help making the witch cult stuff feel better, which I think is the biggest flaw in our index right now, is the witch cult stuff. A lot of the other stuff, while it's a little overpointed, is at least usable. The witch cult stuff to me is the stuff that's just not worth bringing. I don't hate the index nor the detachment. I just feel like it's very bland and generic when compared to some of the others. If you look at CSM, it's a very flavorful index. We are not. I'd like to I'd like a reason to run witches other than just being stubborn, which is why I'm running them now, and cheap bodies. But I'd like to see your thoughts in the comments, so feel free to comment. Tell me what you'd like to see, and that's it. Big shout out to my immortals, Captain Too Tall, the real Donnie G, Lord Wellingstone, and Daniel Bodecker. If you guys would like to see Daniel Bodecker, he will be running his sisters on stream this Thursday. That handsome gentleman will be coming to bring his low tier army against my low tier army. Stay tuned and watch the action. And then thanks for watching. There's going to be a link in the description that'll take you to my WordPress site. It does have a number of short stories written on it. Like I've mentioned this before. And then in addition, you're going to see some Amazon affiliate links down there. So if you need any of the products that are in there and you click those links, it just gives me a little kickback. You guys are awesome. Thank you.